have put a lot more emphasis here on their two picks that they picked up of Lucian. I nearly said Lissandra then. Lucian and Zig. So obviously they weight that more heavily than that increased movement speed. And their final pick was actually Sona. It didn't get locked in, but they said it in the lobby as we headed back out of Champion Select. So Sona will round out their lineup. So it feels like Cloud9's bot lane with MYM's top and jungle would be an incredibly strong team. But I mean,
yeah.
Both teams know what they're doing. They're very high level teams. We saw Odoamne play Trundle yesterday, as you said, against both Shyvana and Mundo. So there's a few things that seem strange in this game, but I trust in the teams to know what they're doing.
There's a couple of things that seem strange, but then you look at like what they could have given their opponents, and like, okay, they've set up Shyvana and Mundo. We really don't want to be giving them like a Karma on top of that, because that would be disastrous. But what we can run is a very strong lane ourselves. Does that work with the rest of our picks? Yes, it does. Trundle doesn't have a solid gap closer, and those picks give it to him. So their compositions do make sense, but more as like a weird counter-picking thing.
Yeah, it's one of those mind games things in Champion Select. You don't want to give away 5 strong picks, although in their own right they are strong picks actually on both sides. Calling Trundle a strong pick it feels really weird for me.
Yeah.
But the utility Trundle brings to the team fights, the amount of presence he has, the zoning, the ability to duel anyone. The Shard of Ice, the Pillar of Ice, is just so good for zoning areas. We saw yesterday fantastic use of the Pillar of Ice out of Odoamne. Count into that Febiven's Gragas. There's just so much in this game that is so high level from both sides that I cannot wait to get into the game. And we'll be heading into the game in just a couple of minutes here, as we are in the delay period. So we're going to go to a very quick break between the loading screen. So we'll be back with you in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to game number 2 here of the Scan Invitational Semi-Finals. It's Meet Your Makers versus Cloud9 Europe, and Meet Your Makers looking to go very aggressive in the early.
Indeed, already jumping onto Voidle, who flashes over the wall very cleanly. Mokatte does land himself a cleaver, or an axe in this case, and I don't think they will be going for this full-on dive, and CHOYOU's bomb did not even make it over the wall.
Yeah, Voidle managing to out-damage Mokatte there, but Mokatte actually is on Mundo this time. We were kind of expecting Mundo maybe to have been in the top lane. Both champions are very versatile, with Shyvana and Mundo being able to fulfill both roles. So not too surprising that we've seen the swap up here after Cloud9 played Trundle into Mundo yesterday and did very, very well against him.
Yeah, so the contrast between Shyvana and Mundo was that Shyvana has a slightly stronger early laning phase compared to Mundo, which should offset Trundle's superb 1v1ing ability in the top lane. So we'll see if that's exactly what Shyvana does, even than a Mundo in top lane.
Yeah, and the one thing that it won't affect is Odoamne's presence during team fights in the mid and late game that we saw yesterday, just using the Pillar of Ice to great effect, being able to zone out members of their opponents. We actually saw this Gragas Trundle composition yesterday where Febiven would be able to push away a lot of the damage so that the rest of Cloud9 could kill the closer members that were trapped by the pillar and then follow up with the rest of the team fight.
Yeah, so we're going to see this invade, but this late invade to pick up the red buff, and have to see if this has been read by Ku, who should in this moment go for the opposing red buff, and we'll have to see if the call comes out, because now they're going to be seeing Makler and Libik. I'm not sure if they saw what direction they were coming from, because that would actually call whether Ku should go for that opposing red buff or not. He's actually hanging around the outside of the wolf pit, which would allow him to make an easier transition to that red buff if he wants to go for it.
And once again, as we mentioned with top lane, not sure there's going to be too much action up there in the early game, as is the meta right now. So we can spend a bit of time focusing on the rest of our lanes. We don't have the same Doran Shield start out of all of the solo laners and the supports that we did in the last game. Would be a bit surprised to have seen that on Gragas and Ziggs, as they're going to be a bit more harass-centric rather than the Kassadin and Katarina that we had last time, who, you know, can do fairly well without starting with that AP start.
Yeah, so this is a little funky. Instead of going for the red buff, because Mundo went all the way to his red buff first, then Ku will take away the second blue buff. So you won't have double buff junglers, but in fact, a blue buff Ku and then a red buff Mundo, which is something you don't see every day.
Yeah, that is not something you see every day at all. But the funny thing about that is both champions will actually benefit fairly well from their respective buffs. I mean, Mundo, he would like the cooldown reduction, but obviously mana does nothing for him. Whereas Elise would like the slow from Red, but mana and cooldown reduction goes pretty well in her kit.
Yeah, so it actually worked out. Now moving on to CHOYOU. Perfect time on the satchel charge, but follow up with the cocoon. Flash from Febiven doesn't actually land the damage from body slam, and nor the barrel roll from CHOYOU's flash, but Summoner's burn all around.
Oh, that was a little unfortunate on the spacing there. Didn't quite land the damage, and didn't result in the kill, but Mokatte is looking for a gank of his own. No wards out yet from Cloud9, but Mokatte didn't quite feel like the gank was on there.
Yeah, just kind of wandered in and didn't want to fully commit. They have no CC in that lane until level 6, so it makes sense even though they can trade, which they're doing now. Makler just dashing out of the inner fire. Now the follow-up from Jarman onto Libik, but mostly just kind of poking at each other until we have the kind of full-on engage at that level 6 area.
We spoke about this a little bit yesterday. You see Sivir throwing out the boomerang blade. There's been a bit of a playstyle change, actually, as there's a gank in the mid lane.
Yeah, this is a playstyle change. Body slam onto 2 does no longer split the damage, so completely melt both of these champions. Ku sitting under the tower, just in case Febiven wanted to go deeper.
Back down to this bottom lane, you can see there's the boomerangs coming out from Sivir. There's been a playstyle change, especially in Korea. They were talking about this during OGN. Chobo was putting a few messages into chat about the changes to Sivir's kit with the adjustments she had recently. Normally you'd have put quite a few points in Q and used that to harass, but it's fairly mana intensive. So recently players in Korea have been putting more points into W and harassing with the ricochet damage rather than the boomerang blade. So it's just a little bit of a tweak in the playstyle that I wonder whether we'll see Jarman follow through here.
Yeah, Jarman's going to ignore that and go for boomerang blade Max first. So
I was going to say, it's not something he's doing yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a few more points in ricochet yet.
Absolutely. We might see that during the laning phase, which is actually very annoying to play against because you just can't stop it from hitting you because it's basically an auto attack. So very annoying to face up against, but we have just headed into a pause and we should be going live again very shortly.
Yeah, unfortunately, pauses do happen, and every time they pause, Ku mentions that he's got food. So I just kind of I have visions of Ku with like this banquet table in his house where they pause and he just like goes and grabs food and comes back because every single time Cloud9 have paused, Ku's like, "Yeah, food time." Yeah.
I actually imagine him on like a swivel chair, and he just like turns around, and there's the banquet table behind him. He's just like, sorry guys, I'm peckish / pause, like rotates.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite a valid reason for pausing in the game, but it is in fact MYM that have paused this game, so hopefully it won't last too long here. They have given out the readies, so we will be back into game in just a matter of seconds. Who
probably just stuffed his face very quickly, which is a talent in itself here, Stress, so I'm glad to see.
Ku's a man of many talents, especially on Lee Sin. That's all I can say. The talent of using your opponents to cross dragon walls is rather spectacular. Yeah,
I believe there's a VOD on YouTube of that now. I saw that earlier. Yeah, very good. And again, both of these guys just poking each other in the bottom lane, and again in the top lane, nothing's really going to happen because Mundo did look for the gank, but all they can do is slow Odoamne down and slightly irritate him. So in the middle lane, we might see some more action.
We may do. Ziggs already has a bit of a CS lead early on, even though he was under a lot of pressure. But in the top lane, Odoamne's in trouble.
Yeah, Odoamne has gone way too far forwards, and Kubon stuck around with Mokatte. He was actually just about to recall, and he was like, surely he's gone by now, and then went for the farm to his demise.
It's one of those decisions that players that emphasize farm too much can actually end up really overstepping the mark sometimes. But Makler, although he's low on mana, has his opponents fairly low on health, so maybe they'll look to do something in this bottom lane, although the skills won't be too available for Makler.
Yeah, as we kind of rapidly approach the level 6 kind of area around the bottom lane, then these guys have way more kill potential. But up until that point, they just kind of bat at each other, and it's very easy to escape from that, because a flash forwards means a flash backwards in return, and an ignite one way just means an ignite in the other. So they're not going to go all the way down to the wire, but at level 6, the instant crescendo coming out, and also just the lockdown when they get closer range for the tether from perhaps Voidle could result in a kill.
At that point, though, the differences between a Sona lane and an Annie lane becomes somewhat apparent, which we'll talk about in a sec, because CHOYOU's being caught out by Ku, but Ku's getting it turned on him.
Indeed, Mokatte has just found himself there, but Febiven moving in from the middle lane means that he's not going to be in too many issues, as CHOYOU is just trying to shove them out, get them away from that ward, and in fact, he does not manage to achieve that goal.
Okay, so as we approach level 6 in this lane, Annie was banned out in this game, so they didn't have the flash initiation from Tibbers, which is fairly instant. Sona's Crescendo, on the other hand, has about a half a second cast range as it moves out from Sona. So it's slightly easier for Sivir to spell shield. You have to still be very quick on it because it is a fast animation, but that's a slight difference here with this Sona pick over an Annie, which wasn't available.
Yeah, because most of the time, actually, did Ziggs just steal that? He didn't. Just had to take a look at that, and then it paused. So we're going to be back in game. Probably Ku has just rotated in his chair for more food. But yeah, in the bottom lane, generally when you spell shield, it's a prediction, like a second or a split second before it happens. Typically, you don't do off reaction unless you're some kind of god. But
well, that's what I mean. Is like if you are running that close, like you can kind of see the positioning. Unless you get flashed out of a bush, you just have that extra half a second or so to get that prediction. It's a little bit more obvious to see coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see the rotation from Cloud9, or rather MYM, because they're on the other side now, that's how the game works, onto Dragon. And it doesn't look like there's going to be any ability to contest this, since the Mega Inferno Bomb has already been used on that blue buff and did not steal it.
Yeah, so Dragon will go over to meet your makers. Mokatte dropping fairly low, but he's Mundo. It doesn't really have too many problems with being low health. Of course, the new defensive mastery tree means that the lower health he goes, the more health regeneration he gets. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing champions like Mundo with that new defensive mastery set.
Yeah, it's very difficult to judge how much kill potential you have on the Munzo when he's very low, when he has that mastery, because he just heals more, and you can't predict unless you have more bursts, which Shyvana actually has in that lane, which is one of the reasons why she's actually good in that matchup.
And one of the reasons why we've seen Trundle in the past couple of days is Odoamne, with that Subjugate, is able to take away a lot of the resistances that Mundo has. So even though he has a lot of sustain down at the lower health, with Trundle, you end up building quite a bit of lifesteal yourself, so you can actually out-sustain and out-damage Mundo with that Subjugate reduction of his resistances on.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if he can do the exact same thing against Kubon, because Odoamne with Subjugate can basically 1 versus 1 anyone.
Yeah.
But the problem is his teamfight presence isn't amazing, whereas Shyvana, Mundo, Renekton, the rest of the top laners do huge amounts of AoE damage, whereas Odoamne, yes, he has the disruption from the pillar, but there's more kind of clutch circumstances in which that's good, like jungle fights or small bottlenecks.
Now, as we head into a little bit of one of these lull periods again, let's take a look at the itemization on some of the champions. Not too surprising to see our mid laners both pretty much have identical builds. Only one Doran's ring separates each other. Both Ziggs and Gragas just like to build Athene's Unholy Grail. It gives them every stat that they need, really, to then get a good basis for the game. Mundo, on the other hand, in the jungle has already finished his Spirit of the Ancient Golem, whereas you can see that the Doran's start from Elise has put us slightly behind, or at least has picked up a Doran's. I'm not actually too sure if she started the game with that. Explosive Cast goes out on Mokatte, but he gets away from that one just in the nick of time.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what Febiven was trying to do there. He first disrupted the recall, landed the Q, didn't know if he had enough damage, and just threw the barrel anyway. I guess there was nothing else he was going to use the barrel for, so I guess it makes sense in that respect. But Makler will drop in the bottom lane. In fact, he drops his opponent in the bottom lane of Voidle. Jarnan backs off from Libik, and that was a very swift kill indeed. Now, Ku heading around the side, Mokatte waiting in the wings, just walks into the bush and has found himself Makler and Mokatte. Mega Inferno Bomb comes across the side, will cut off the escape route and force the flash from Ku.
And Cloud9 were the ones that were looking to be aggressive there, and they ended up getting caught out. Libik choosing to use the crescendo onto Karma there, making sure they locked down Voidle. Voidle didn't even get a chance to flash out because he was already dead by the time that he would have been able to make that decision. So a good pick-off by Meet Your Makers, and in this game they have themselves the early lead.
They do, which is different to the first game in which Cloud9 just got ahead and rolled the punches, kept getting those small advantages up until the point where they picked up a casual 16-minute Baron and thus rolled the game from there. So we'll have to see if Meet Your Makers can, one, stop that from happening, which should be fairly easy to do now that they know that they had the potential to try and go for that play, that they have once again picked up the Elise.
We've seen Ku just do so much work on these early game jungle champions, although yesterday he started out with the more reactive, more farm-based Elise. That is something that isn't too usual for Ku. We talked about it. He much prefers being proactive in the early game, and I'm wondering whether we'll see him start to take that role a bit more in this game, because he's up in CS from those jungle minions, which, you know, jungler CS isn't the most important thing if they're getting kills and assists, but you can see clearly that he's been farming. Now is his time to gank.
Yeah, mobility means you're going to be moving very quickly, and this is something that we don't always see from Elise, but something that is basically Ku's playstyle. Again, Makler drops Voidle in the bottom lane. Jarnan might be on the receiving end of another death. Mokatte on his face. Underneath that turret, Makler going to tank a couple turret shots, but 2-0, they'll take that trade.
They will. Unfortunately for them, Dragon is not available at this point, so they can't really rotate around for anything on the global objectives side, but Mokatte drops very low, trying to do golems, but you may be Mundo, but without your sadism available, that's going to be a tricky one to do yourself.
Yeah, he took the big one, and he'll leave the small one to live for another day, and I actually think the small one would have killed him at that stage. But 4-1, and MYM taking a very significant lead in the early game. Again, not going to close the game out just yet until we see a bigger shift. So let's take a look at some of these lanes in terms of CS. Mid lane is very even. They've done very similar things. Well, one kill went down, but they haven't done anything since then. And then the top lane, unless they just go all in on each other, a kill's not really going to happen without the intervention of a gank. But it just looked like they're very even, especially when he's able to use substigate.
AD Carry is going for very similar builds here as well. So this is the style of Lucian that we've seen that adds extra damage to the culling. When you get the Bloodthirster, it adds that base damage on rather than the Trinity Force, which gives you a little bit better stats for team fighting, but reduces the damage for the culling. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Trinity Force second, which is actually what Zen and the Stoic, which is the champion designer for Lucian, has hinted at on Twitter a few times, that he prefers Bloodthirster first into Trinity Force for that reason.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can build him, and Odoamne drops very low in the top lane, but Ku's waiting in the wings, ready to follow up. Dragon Descent comes across, lands the Flame Breath, and is going toe-to-toe. Subjugate has also been popped, and I think Kubon may even drop without Ku's help. And both of these guys back off. There is time to kind of run away from the fight when you don't really want to commit. But Dragon is now being contested, knowing that the jungler is in the top lane, that being Ku. Febiven waiting over the wall, does have the potential to steal that using his ultimate. And that Mokatte trying to nuke this down as fast as possible. The rest of the team, Smite comes out. They will pick that one up, and Ku also arrive and see if they get a pick on the backside. But 4 versus 4, Mega Inferno Bomb drops Febiven on Makler. However, Makler popping the culling. Mokatte on Voidle, trying to grind him down. CHOYOU just throwing out the auto attacks against Jarnan. Not going to be able to do too much. Popping over the wall at the right angle. And now Mokatte is in the middle of no man's land, but still taking down Voidle with CHOYOU moving around from the side. Febiven finally returns into the fight. Very stringy fight in all stress.
Everybody forgot about Febiven in that fight. He managed to get himself off to the side, come back in for the kill, and as you said, very nice jump out from CHOYOU to get over that wall. But that dragon ended up going to... Yeah, it was MYM that secured the dragon for their second one of the game, and have picked up a good few kills now as well as those objectives. So they're doing a good job of keeping themselves ahead, and when you get ahead, get more ahead. That's really how you end up winning in League of Legends. But one of the big things going back to that top lane, actually, Febiven with the snipe in the middle lane with that explosive cask. But we saw the trade earlier in the top lane between Shyvana and Trundle, And you could see Trundle start to out-sustain Shyvana already. We saw yesterday Odoamne build this Sunfire Cape into, I believe it was Blade of the Ruined King second for that extra lifesteal. He didn't even have the Vampiric Scepter. He's got a longsword now, which I assume will go towards that. But if he's already out-sustaining in these teamfights over Kubon, that's not a good sign that he can already begin to 1v1 their tanks.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just a question of can he actually close the gap, but because they have the Karma, that's probably a yes. Defiance has been used defensively. Mokatte is there to defend the turret, but only 82 HP remaining. Not sure how long they can keep this up, but I agree completely, Stress. When we get into team fight, it's a matter of can Odoamne just completely shut down Shyvana when she's trying to get on those squishes of John and indeed Febiven.
And you might have seen that trade up in the top lane there between Odoamne and Kubon and thought I was kind of being crazy with what I was saying about out-trading. Odoamne saved Subjugate there because he knew Ku was on his way to the top lane. Ku walked over a ward, so they were able to reposition so that Shyvana wasn't vulnerable. But very smart play by Odoamne not to trade in the 1v1 when there's a 2v1 potentially in 30 seconds. That's just great team play between the members of Cloud9.
Yeah, and he will not want to be using Subjugate, especially if Kubon does not use his kind of finisher and all-in ability of Dragon's Descent. So he wants to save that, and even though he is being punished, he needs to make sure that he doesn't just waste it. And now he's using Subjugate just so he can get himself back into this lane, and will just shove Kubon out until the end of that channel.
Yeah, Kubon knows he instantly cannot trade. That's not an option for him right now at all. So smart play on both players. They clearly already have read this lane and seen how the trading between the two champions is going to go. So already showing the high level of players in this in this challenger game.
Yeah, so again, the bottom lane, not too much happening right now, but Mokatte will kind of spice things up as he walks into the bush. Will be warded, so they know exactly what's coming to them, but Mokatte on about 40% HP. The axe does not quite connect, but he is going very deep on this one. Tether is going to land and not quite go to fruition, and Libik trying his best to kind of secure Mokatte's escape route, and then ends up walking out. But nothing too much going to happen in the bottom lane here, Stress.
Yeah, Mokatte with that sadism running, pretty happy to tank up a couple of turret shots, maybe more than he would have liked, but it's not always the worst option for Mundo, but they might be caught under turret here.
Yep, so now the Ku's in the top lane, they're going to go for this initiate. John and takes all of the culling. Libik has dropped very low. Voidle's the only one to stop this. Now Gragas has arrived into the action. Voidle was still there trying to lock down Mokatte, flashes out. Meanwhile, on the top lane, we see Kubon dropping. And that was the end of the bottom lane engagement, but CHOYOU is still looking for more blood. The volatile Spiderling will land. Odoamne see if they can get this dive off because only 150 HP on the turret. Odoamne still taking more tower shots. CHOYOU trying to finish off one of these opponents. Perfect killer. Just locks him in place.
And that's the first impact of that Pillar of Ice that we've seen in this game. I mean, and we'll have to get used to seeing that. That was a big dive in the top lane against Shyvana. Shyvana tried to get away using Dragon's Descent, but just wasn't quite fast enough. Makler might be caught here.
Yeah, body slam comes through, and the barrel roll. Voidle takes that one down. Febiven not even needing to use his ultimate. That wasn't called on at the time.
And that'll be another turret in favor of Cloud9. They now are up to 3. This is the point of the game where they feel very comfortable to start taking the vision away from MYM. Voidle gets his recall stopped by Libik. Just, again, mind games between these players. Want to make sure that everybody is on edge. But Cloud9 now have the lead in this game from being 3,000 gold behind, so we're seeing their resolve in action here. It's one of the questions of new teams is how do they deal with being behind? And clearly Cloud9's way of dealing with it is rotating your opponents pretty much out of the game.
Yeah, indeed. Like, we've seen Cloud9 literally winning the game from the offset and just then winning the game outright. Yeah. But they've never really been on the back foot, and this time they have, and they're still showing that they can operate perfectly well, picking up all 3 of the outer turrets. Dragon is going to be up in 20 seconds, and they're in really good shape to try and not only go for a fight, but just straight up pick up the dragon themselves.
MYM, I believe, yeah, they got the first dragon in this game. If I'm not mistaken, it's only 1, but today MYM have had great dragon control. In the first game, they got the majority of dragons as well, and Cloud9 ended up winning that game, but MYM just with great objective control today. You're seeing why these teams are high level of challenger, and it looks like Cloud9 are the ones that want it.
Yep, Mega Inferno Bomb comes across. Voidle lands the snare onto Libik, but the follow-up onto CHOYOU is strong. Crescendo comes across. I don't think it tagged anyone. Odoamne is melting everyone in the back lines. Makler running away from the Troll King, and the Febiven's trying to get out of the dodge alongside his ally. He does not want to be duking back into them, even to get out of the cleaver. Odoamne is probably going to slowly die here. Right about now, there we go. He is very, very tanky, but 4 members wailing on you will result in your death.
And there were a couple of key things in that team fight that meant Cloud9 didn't get the fight they wanted. A brilliant satchel charge out of CHOYOU knocked 3 members of Cloud9 backwards into the Dragon Pit, delaying their engage. The follow-up then from Odoamne from the back actually pillared himself away from the 2 targets he wants to be dueling. He couldn't get to Kubon and Mokatte. He couldn't out-damage them with that subjugate active. So Kubon and Mokatte had free reign in the backline of Cloud9 to take out so much of their damage that Cloud9 just couldn't re-engage. From there, Odoamne cannot do a 1v4. That's not possible for Trundle. So we've seen great pillars out of Odoamne, but this time that pillar worked against him.
Yeah, we haven't seen very much for Trundle. This is the first time I've casted him since basically Season 2, before the remake. So I'm used to all the old skill names like Pillar of Filth, and I don't know his presence in the team fight compared to like the current meta, because right here he was of course picked as more of a counter pick, and indeed this will work in the top lane. Dragon Descent has been used by Kubon. Burnout in 1 second will be used. Pillar comes through, forcing the flash from Kubon.
Yeah, as you're saying, his teamfight presence is somewhat not unknown, but it's just not as regular. Normally you don't see champions that want to duel tanks. You see champions that want to dive the backline and deal with a lot of the damage dealers. Even the tanks don't really want to face up against each other in fights because it takes too much of their time to kill each other. So Odoamne is playing a very different style of champion that works very well in the meta. The problem he has is they have to take the right fights. He has to be able to get on his targets, otherwise he can't complete his job.
Yeah, like, it's a good counter pick, but how good is it going to be for the rest of the game? That's kind of the question here. And Odoamne has shown it's pretty strong, but you have to be able to use the pillar to good effect, otherwise you're not using his kit. Oh, completely whiffs the ultimate from Febiven, trying to mad life Kubon. It's actually not going to matter. However, Mokatte 1 versus 2 might be able to just clean up house. 1 drops, moving on to Febiven with Burning Agony. Just going to walk around in circles. Libik comes in for the nice assist, and that's going to be a shutdown for Mokatte.
And again, they don't get the fight that they want. Odoamne not available to deal with Mokatte that's at full health, and Odoamne has already been dueling Kubon. They just have to be careful here that Cloud9 take the right fights. They've lost their gold lead only by a marginal amount, but Cloud9 do have to be careful that MYM don't start getting back into this one because they're closing in on the mid lane.
Yeah, they can't just afford to allow all these kills to be donated. Libik is going to find himself Jonan and Voidle. Not got too much follow-up, but here's the cavalry as Trundle just respawns. Jonan following up, but Febiven is already in the death chamber, and Libik has already died. Not a bit curious on the positioning there, here, Stress.
Yeah, they didn't have Odoamne either, as you said, had only just respawned, so one of those fights that they wanted to pick one and get away from, and they will end up getting that. And Cloud9 now got the benefit from that fight, but ended up losing a tower. So overall, at this point in the game, you'd expect outer towers to be falling. So the gold change there does go in favor of MYM, but Cloud9 clearly are just showing us that they're being a little bit more careful with their fights now.
Yeah, so probably now is a good time to take stock of the item builds before we have the dragon in around 2 minutes. So the Blades of Rune King is being picked up by both of the top laners, but slight advantage to Trundle. That's kind of the story in most of these lanes here, Stress, that they have an item or maybe half an item over their counterpart. Rabadon Zefcap already finished by Gragas over that Ziggs, but he's going back and is most likely able to finish that himself now. And again, Bloodthirster and Trinity Force up against, in fact, 2 damage items and a half.
Yeah, it actually looked like Gragas was quite far ahead by the fact he had Rabadon's Void Staff over the Sorcerer's Boots needlessly large rod that Ziggs had, but Ziggs was actually carrying 1700 gold, so you see he finishes off the Rabadons himself. Already has Homeguard level 3 boots, which is a choice that some players will make to get Homeguard earlier to make sure they can get back to lane if they're getting pushed out very quickly. So not too surprising to see them at this point in the game, and I believe they'll be fairly similar on the damage. The gold is about 800 in favor of Gregor, so that's where he has that slight lead from.
Yep, so Odoamne and Kubon both popping their ultimates. Kubon using his defensively, does not want to go toe-to-toe with subjugated Trundle, but that will mean that Dragon spawning in 40 seconds. They're going to start gearing up for this. Ku does not want to drop here. Makler following through, just takes down a couple spidlings for his trouble. So, another 30 seconds of that. Ping's going to the middle lane and trying to rotate onto this one as fast as possible from both of these teams.
MYM committed hard to preparing the Baron area, and that's meant that Cloud9 have an open turret here in that middle lane. They don't have the minion wave because of a nice ultimate coming out from Ziggs. They just have to be careful they don't get caught out here.
Yeah, indeed. See if they can collapse. Of course, the Mega Inferno Bomb will not be used offensively, but Ku takes another cleaver. So a 50% tank, but a lack of ultimate. I don't think either teams want to fight until the Dragon is on the line.
Dragon will be up in 5 seconds. Ku recalling here is a big tell that Cloud9 maybe don't have the best timing on this one, as Smite being not available for this Dragon means that MYM can just do it very quickly, no chance of contesting. So MYM will once again establish about 1,000 gold lead here in this game.
Yeah, so it's kind of a passive game in the sense that we're looking for more rotations and trying to pick up objectives while the other isn't there, and then rather than like going for a head-on fight, because Cloud9 do not want to fight Meet Your Makers 5 versus 5 because they will most likely lose. There's very few circumstances in which Odoamne's kind of team fight presence can be used to full effect, whereas Meet Your Makers are always going to be strong no matter where you catch them.
Now, they are starting the Baron. They do have the damage to do this, but not with MYM so close. They've put the ward down. There's a playstyle difference as Febiven picks Libik off. That was just off the side of my screen. I'll get to this point in a second, as it looks like the teams are retreating from each other, but there's a playstyle difference between this Shyvana and Mundo than we normally see. You typically take teleport on one of them so that you're able to split push across the map, but MYM are used to playing with Charu, who's normally the one running teleport.
Yeah, both the supports going to meet their doom here, as Odoamne has come in from the backside, seeing we can get the perfect pillar. He is in the jungle, flash over the wall to follow Kubon. Febiven's also arrived with the Hextech minefield coming across from that, from the Ziggs and into the satchel charge. Makler just kind of kiting his way backwards. Nice juke out of the cocoon, but 1 for 2 trade, and the Pillar of Ice would completely cut them off. They might well choose to try and go for this Baron.
The final point of that is that Kubon also wants Ignite. Sorry to completely talk over the end of that team fight. Kubon wants Ignite to win the lane against Odoamne, but he hasn't been able to get those team fights. But Febiven looks for a kill.
Yeah, the crescendo comes across onto Febiven and he will be retreating. Makler caught in a nasty situation. Jonan's going to try and follow up. Flash comes through, looking for the last boomerang blade to secure this kill. 1 versus 2. Libik unable to really escape. Flash over the wall. Red buff was damaging him. They're going to go for round 2 onto Baron. Who do they have left? Shyvana coming back from base, rocketing out of the spawn pad with home guard boots, but this Baron is flying down.
Yeah, Odoamne is plenty tanky enough with the damage from his team to burst this one down pretty quickly. And these skirmishes just favour the Cloud9 team composition. They're able to catch somebody out and move onto them so quickly with the Karma and Sivir that it's very difficult for MYM to take anything that isn't a 5v5 team fight.
Yeah, it's just very smart rotations and just catching MYM in bad situations. Like we said, there's very few places where they can catch them, but they're finding those small opportunities in which, like, many other teams would not even see.
Let's take a look at the items once again. Now, Trinity Force was finished a little while back by Lucian. As we said, we were expecting that to be picked up after the Bloodthirster, and fairly standard continuation is to go for the Last Whisper, so not too far off that for Lucian, but the difference in gold has meant between the two teams that Sivir, on the other hand, while being a kill down, has the Bloodthirster and Last Whisper alongside a lot of the makings here of a couple more items here to go in the kit. Zeal has been picked up alongside a BF sword, so there's quite a lot of damage there on Sivir with those components to the items. Also, Randuin's nearly completed onto Ku, so once they've got that, it's going to be even more difficult for MYM to escape.
Yeah, Cloud9 is actually going to find it very difficult to start. If they do not get a pick and do not get a team fight, then start sieging underneath turrets, because CHOYOU exists and will be using the Mega Inferno Bomb, will be blocked by Janan, juking around the bombs, and the rest of it will pick up the kill by himself with no intervention from the rest of his team.
And the cast time on the Mega Inferno Bomb just allowed Janan to activate that spell shield whenever he wanted during that animation, because it was going to last long enough for that bomb to fall. So it looked like CHOYOU felt he had the kill there, but Janan just outplaying with the mind games there.
It was very tight either way there, Stress. One more auto attack, I'm sure, would have taken him down from that short fuse passive. Kubon and Odoamne just not really doing too much in the top lane, and Lucian recalling back to base. So now they have that pick, they might be able to take some of these inner turrets down, and Ku heading around all the way from the backside, trying to take down one of these squishier targets. Mokatte is just getting himself back up to full HP, and this tower should be falling, but the creep wave is already disintegrated.
You can see the damage from Ku already. He's picked up a Haunting, guys, to make sure that he can deal damage on his abilities. CHOYOU's been caught out, they're diving him in the base.
He's only just come out of the death chamber and he goes back in there again, spending almost 2 minutes out of the action. Kubon will also be joining his ally in there. Febiven gets locked up, Cristiano comes across, Libik has dropped low, but Odoamne just decimates his target. 3-for-1 trade. Mokatte is still caught outside of his base, not the place you want to be, sir. And that will also be taken down. 4-for-1, easily an inhibitor, maybe even the game. The only person alive is Libik. GG has been caught by Voidle.
Odoamne's Trundle is insane in this current meta. As long as they pick these skirmish fights where it's 1v1 or 2v2, he can outduel anybody. And Cloud9 once again pick Trundle in this skirmish composition and once again have a victory. They move on to the finals, and Cloud9 are looking very strong here.
Yeah, taking that 2-0, finding the only real opportunity they had to finish that game and doing it at the right time in the right place. Perfect play by Cloud9.
And that means Cloud9 will be advancing to our grand finals, which will be taking place, I believe, once the other semi-final, of course, has finished. We had scheduled that for 1500 CET, which I believe is going to be in another hour's time.